Well, I've still got about 3 or 4 minutes, and the let's see, the trivia quiz is still going on. Did you hear some of the trivia quiz?
Yeah, I was there a little bit at the beginning, and then I had to run and take care of a few things.
They were hilarious. Oh, right now there's a little flickering going on. Oh, it stopped now. No.
With my webcam, or
no,
with
the presentation's flicking between the PowerPoint and a mountain. It's flicking back and forth between the two.
Very strange, because I'm not getting anything on my end.
Can you move forward and back, just so that we can see if... Okay, now it seems to have stopped. Good.
Okay.
Well, we've got a couple of minutes, and it sounds like the trivia quiz is done. Oh, it's starting to do that flickering again. Now it stopped.
Strange, because what I had just done was minimize the...
Someone else has just commented that the screen's flickering on their computer too. So it's starting to more and more that it's flickering between the PowerPoint presentation and the mountain background.
Mm-hmm. Let's see if that stops it. Because it seemed to be doing that, it looks like, when I had the webinar window open and when I was adjusting that so I could see my screens without that in the way.
Yeah, now it stopped. Okay. Cool.
Leave the webinar buttons alone now.
Well, it looks like it's 2:40, so I want to welcome everyone. My name is Becky Rares, and I'll be moderating the session. And you're here for Online Learning Readiness, helping students succeed in online classes. And just so you know, I'm sure you've heard this before, but in case this is your first session, the session is being recorded, and you'll receive an email announcement once the recordings are available. If you have any questions during the session, please type them in the questions box in the GoToWebinar panel. And the presenter for this session is Christina Schreiber, and she is an instructional design and distance learning coordinator at Northwest State Community College in Ohio. Starting in IT in 2007, she became responsible for supporting their LMS and their online classes in 2008. She recently obtained her master's in learning design and technology from Purdue University and has transferred out of IT to focus on supporting faculty and students in online and blended classes. And here is Christina.
Okay, hi. The idea of student success is becoming more important. It's not just enough to have students enrolled. We have to help them successfully complete their classes. So in this presentation, I'd like to share with you our story and how we're trying to help students succeed in online classes. To give you some perspective of where I'm coming from, Northwest State is a 2-year community college in rural Northwest Ohio. We have approximately 5,000 students, most of them part-time, and on average about 15 to 30% of our enrollment each semester is in online classes. So I began seriously looking at student success in online classes a few years ago when I had asked our data guru, Terry, for the numbers of students dropping online classes after the first day, withdrawing from classes, or failing the online classes. And you can see those numbers here. Obviously, I didn't have all of them at that time. I've gotten updates from Terry each semester. And I've read over the years on average that the percent of students that fail to complete online classes is usually about double that of the face-to-face classes. Our numbers for the online classes range between 2 to 3 times that of our face-to-face classes, and even if that's within the range of average, I really didn't like those numbers, so I began asking what we could try to do to bring the percentage of students that are failing their online classes, bring that percentage down. So the Distance Learning Committee and I really looked at a number of factors that we felt were affecting student success and trying to see where we were falling short. The LMS is one factor, and at that point in time we had just recently switched from WebCT to Sakai, and we were already feeling that that was much better, a lot more potential, so we were definitely moving in the right direction there. Another factor was institutional support for the online learners, and we had some online resources for them, but we didn't feel this was the most critical factor since actually a pretty small number of our students take only online classes. Most are combining face-to-face and online to best fit their schedule. Course design and course delivery were other factors we were also working on. Couldn't claim perfection, but again, moving in the right direction there. But student readiness, we had nothing. We had no way to make sure that students were prepared for online classes. And from my time in IT, I had seen students who had absolutely no clue what they were getting into. Just as one example, I had a student who did not have a computer at home at all, and she was planning on doing everything in her online class at work during the 10-minute breaks she got each night. Obviously, that did not work out. So we had tried a few ways in the past to help students with online classes, even before that point. For a few semesters, we had offered face-to-face workshops the first week of classes to help students log into Sakai, find their classes, and figure out what they needed to do. But no one was coming. I was sitting in an empty lab more often than not. We had a session in our new student orientation, we call it SOAR, that walked students through a sample online class. But that session and a few other optional sessions that were part of SOAR were discontinued, mostly due to cognitive overload. We were throwing so much information at students in that one day that they couldn't let it all sink in. And also a lot of them were not planning on taking an online class right then, so they really zoned out through the entire presentation. We also have some online and printed materials for students on how to use Sakai, but it was obvious that the students that needed that information the most weren't reading it. So the Distance Learning Committee was looking for new options to try to prepare students for online classes. One idea that was discussed briefly was a freshman experience type class, and that was rejected because we don't really have a traditional freshman class. We get a mix of the traditional students right out of high school, students coming back to school after years in the workforce. We have a number of high school students taking college classes, guest students from nearby universities taking a couple classes to transfer back, and even some students who got a one-year technical certificate here and then decide to continue to get the 2-year degree. So it's hard to define where something like that would fit. And at least here in Ohio, there's been a push for colleges to reduce the number of credit hours we're requiring, not increase it. We had looked at a few commercially available placement tests, but most of those focused pretty heavily on just computer skills, and we know that that's not all that's involved in an online class. We did look at one called Smarter Measure that did ask several questions about study skills and habits, but we would have had to do a lot of work to try to customize it for our classes. And cost was also a big factor there, especially when we were talking about scaling it up for all students in online classes. So what we decided to do was build a custom online workshop, or sort of a micro course. We had a few other workshops in Sakai for students. We used it for financial aid, satisfactory academic progress, and for the online version of our SOAR orientation for students who couldn't come to campus. So we had some experience using Sakai project sites for this sort of thing. So in October 2013, we began creating what we came to call the Online Learning Readiness Assessment, or OLR. From the start, our focus was on multiple factors that affect student success, not just on using a computer. Unfortunately, there's no way to test for the tendency to procrastinate, but we can at least make sure that students are aware of the risks and the consequences of doing that. We built a short 19-question test that students would have to pass. 18 of those questions are just basic multiple choice or true-false, and the last one was more of a contractual style question. I understand that this is what's involved in online classes and this is what's expected of me, and their options are I agree or I do not agree. And we ended up breaking the content down into 6 modules, and we created a few videos and some storyline presentations to try to make the content as interesting as possible. Behind the scenes, I worked with IT to create a field in Banner to store our test scores for the online learning readiness. And we put that in the same form as our normal placement test scores, ACT scores, and things like that. And I worked with Longsight to have them upload a file with the student IDs and scores on a regular basis, which we then import into our Banner system.
Christina, I have a question. It's more related to your prior slide, and that is from Nicola. Students need to learn how to learn online, and are educators aware of this? Can a course or workshop for students be generic, or do you think it needs to be embedded in undergrad, and should this be compulsory?
We are making it compulsory for our students, and mostly generic enough. Just a lot of it's even about things that all students need to know. There's things in there mentioned a little later, but things about like time management, motivation, just to make them aware that they can't slack off and expect to be able to do everything in the last 2 weeks of the class and still be able to pass it. Our classes do have some like getting started information that has course-specific information. This is something that's just real generic that can be applied to all of our classes.
Okay, thanks.
So we went into our Banner system and we actually added this as a prerequisite to all of our online sections to make it mandatory. We set the cutoff score at 75% on that test, and that was kind of arbitrary actually. We figured 75% is a solid C, and we figured we could adjust it later as needed. We did have a lot of discussion about who needed to take it, and eventually the Distance Learning Committee agreed that students who had already completed online classes obviously knew what they were doing. So we tried to identify students who had taken an online class, not hybrid or blended, but purely online, in Sakai, not going back into WebCT, and had passed that online class with a C or higher. And we went in and we gave all of those guys an automatic 101%, so they could go in and continue to take online classes without having to go through this. We decided that everyone else, including the high school students and guest students, would need to take the online learning readiness. And we set this up as a joinable site in Sakai and have students add themselves via the membership tool. We provided some step-by-step instructions for that and a video showing them how.
Christina, someone said that they also have an online readiness certificate. It looks like it's Dave Eveland, and he said that it takes about 5 hours to do, and that they've leveraged it. They don't tie it to their student information system, but students have to pass it in order to take any online course. And he loves it that you've provided to us a guest account, so he wants to try it out and thanks you for that.
Yep, you're more than welcome to take a look at it. So our online learning readiness assessment actually went live in early March 2014, just in time for summer and fall registration that year. The content has been tweaked a little since then just to add more details or clarification, and I'm really looking forward to making some big changes in the Sakai section once Sakai 11 comes out. But here's just a screenshot of it, and you can see our 6 modules there on the left. Online learning sort of looks at what an online class is compared to the other course types we offer. Computer competency has the basic computer skills that students are expected to have before starting an online class, and also talks a little about like what file types they should be saving their assignments as. Sakai overview is how to navigate Sakai and how the basic course tools work, tests and quizzes, assignments, forums. Life Factors looks at some of the more personal issues, time management, motivation, support that can affect their success. In an online class has some of our expectations for once they're in a class, and includes like how they should contact their instructor and view feedback for assignments and things like that. And then Myths and Truths has some of the really common myths about online classes that some of our students are still believing. So the information for the guest account is also on the page where we uploaded our slides for you. So you are, again, more than welcome to go in and take a look at that. View the content, take the test. We did run into a number of problems and challenges in trying to implement this. Some we fixed, others we're still trying to address. And the first challenge was actually getting that prerequisite added to all the online sections. Since this didn't affect all sections of a course, we couldn't put it through as a catalog change the way we'd normally update prerequisites. It had to be added to each section one by one. Now that it's been over a year, when we roll over the schedule, most already have that prerequisite set, but then we have to remember to add it if any new online classes are added to the schedule. Actually, just this fall, we've got an automated email that goes out to me and the division secretaries if there's any classes missing that prerequisite to alert us to get that added. Student awareness has been a big challenge. To let students know about this, we have information on our website. We have an announcement on our campus portal. We tell students about it at SOAR orientation. And then before registration opens up for the next semester, I send out a couple emails reminding students who have not already completed the OLR that they need to take it if they're planning on registering for any online classes. I had also worked with IT to edit the registration error message that students get. Now when it tells students that there's a prerequisite error, it says, if you need the online learning readiness, here's the link with instructions to access it. But the registration error doesn't tell students what prereq they're actually missing, and students don't read the if in there. So I have students going in and taking the OLR when they really need to take Composition 1 or another math class or any other prerequisite first. And that's still a problem, and there's not really an easy solution. I've considered removing that message, but I've decided to keep it for now, just sort of on the assumption it's better that students take the OLR and not necessarily need it than students need the OLR and not know that they need it. There were some students who had problems following the instructions to join the OLR site. I personally say that's not a problem that needs to be fixed. It's a component of the test. If you can't follow some pretty simple instructions without someone standing behind you saying, now click here, you're probably not ready for an online class. We also have a number of high school students taking college classes. Ohio calls it College Credit Plus, but they're ideally supposed to complete the OLR before they submit the list of classes they want to their high school guidance counselors. In reality, they don't necessarily do that, and then our advisors have to check each student to see if they completed the OLR before they can be added to an online class. That's been a lot of work and frustration for our advisors, as they have to contact the students and then continue to check to see if they've actually completed the OLR. Right now, our advisors and the admission team are working just to try to streamline that entire process, so I'm keeping out of that for now. We've also had problems with some of our advisors and deans overriding the prerequisite to let students into online classes without the OLR. Sometimes this was deliberate. They wanted to get the student into that class before the section filled up. Other times they had just forgotten about the OLR and thought they were overriding normal prerequisites. The first year, I really chased these students down. I sent emails, I sent letters asking them to complete the OLR before the first day of the semester. Some did, some didn't. Starting this summer, the registrar and I decided to really enforce that prerequisite, take no prisoners. Students now get 2 emails reminding them to complete the OLR, and if they don't pass it within 2 weeks or by the first day of classes, whichever comes first, they get dropped. And we've also had some confusion between the OLR and some of the other pre-registration workshops we have in Sakai, including the online SOAR orientation, our computer placement test. Students need to take Introduction to Computers, and the College Credit Plus sort of pre-advising workshop. All these sites have very different names, but there have been several times when students have completed one of these thinking it was the Online Learning Readiness. I'm not sure what we can do there other than try to force the students to read the instructions. So far, about 4 times a year, I've been sending out a survey to all the students who've passed the OLR in the prior months. And one of the first questions I ask them is how long it took them to review the content and take the test. 60% of our students have been saying it's taken them less than an hour to review the content and go through the test. 85% are managing it in less than 2 hours. So this kind of tells me that what we have is not an unreasonable burden on students. I don't think it's too much to ask that they spend 2 to 3 hours to make sure that they have the skills and knowledge to be able to handle an online class. As our one participant mentioned, I wouldn't even consider 5 hours unreasonable. If someone was taking, a whole day trying to go through it, then maybe you'd need to look at, cutting it down a bit, but it's not an unreasonable burden on them. Another set of questions I always ask is if they feel the modules were useful in helping them prepare for online classes. Over half are saying that yes, each section is useful. Quite a few were uncertain, but since they haven't actually completed an online class at the time of the survey is understandable. And a pretty small amount, less than 15%, are saying it's not useful. So from where I'm sitting, if 75% of students in online classes are looking at this information and not considering it an absolute waste of their time, I think that's pretty good. The last question on that survey asks students what they think would make the online learning readiness more useful for them. And as you can imagine, the answer varied. Some say it should be shorter. Others want more information, more explanation. A few do complain about being required to take it, but we also get many who say that they thought it was helpful and informative. I do review these each time and see if there's any suggestions that can be implemented, and try to keep improving what we have. Going back to the numbers, these are the same numbers I had at the beginning, just broken down by semester. And the purple line there shows when the online classes started requiring the online learning readiness. The percentage of students that failed online classes and the percentage that have dropped, withdrew, or failed has gone down each semester since the OLR was implemented. Sometimes very slightly, other times a lot more dramatically. Fall 2014 was the greatest decrease. which makes sense as fall is the greatest influx of new students. And in fact, if we take a closer look at last fall, we had a small group of students who were in online classes but never took the OLR, just from the overrides. The percentage of these students that dropped, withdrew, or failed was 25%, which is a lot more in line with the numbers from before the OLR. Now I know 28 students is not a meaningful sample size, but you do have to admit that there's a pretty significant difference between those students who did not take the OLR and the ones that did. And if you also look on the page where I've got the slides posted, I also do have a second document with some analysis looking if this is a statistically significant decrease. I'm not going to get into that in depth here, but just a quick answer. Yes, there's a significant decrease for all but one of these percentages from immediately before the purple line to immediately after it. Can I say conclusively that the changes in these numbers are entirely due to the online learning readiness? Sorry about that. No, I can't. There's a lot of factors that influence student success, but between the survey results and these numbers, it does show that the OLR is having, some good effect. Generally, online classes can require a lot more of students than some of the face-to-face classes, and the challenge of online classes should be the content, not the environment. So just before letting students go diving headfirst into online classes, let's help them understand what they're getting into and make sure that they have the knowledge and the skills to succeed. What we've developed, while not perfect, definitely does have the potential to have a pretty significant impact on student success. I don't know, is there any questions over there? And I've also got my email. Any of you are welcome to reach out, contact me if you've got any questions about our online learning readiness, what we've built, why we've done what we've done, or why we didn't do something.
There is a question. Dave asked, is the ORL hard to maintain?
Not really. Most of the information there is pretty generic. I've gone in as I've had more time and just added content. I really would love to, like I said, go through and redo the Sakai course overview and do more like a simulation, a lot more interactive. But I'm holding off on doing that until after we get Sakai 11 because I don't want to spend hours making a new version and then have to change it when we update. But no, it's actually more time consuming to try to keep track of who's currently registered for classes without the OLR and give them their 2 emails and send them to the registrar to be dropped if they don't take it. So that's where my time is consumed with this.
Okay, there's a lot more questions coming in. Let's see. Yona asked, when are students given access to your course?
Since it's a joinable site, pretty much as soon as they have a student ID number, they could get in and take it.
Okay, and then
I wanted to make it more on demand so they could take it when they felt they wanted to look at an online class.
Let's see. So we've gotten inspirational, thank you. We've tried the in-person workshops too, and this is a great approach. And then there's a question from Peter Cooper. Can you detail a bit more what kind of questions are in the OLR assessment? You mentioned multiple choice type questions, but what kind of things are the questions asking of the students?
We've got one question that is a multiple select one. That's, what file types are, always good unless you're, to submit for assignments unless your instructor specifically requests a different one. We've got one that is, true or false, online classes take less time than face-to-face classes. When you get into a new online class, which of these Sakai tools should be one of the first things you click on, the syllabus. So a lot of it's pretty basic. It's more just meant to ensure that they go through and review some of the stuff before they can go into the online classes.
Sean asked, how do we log in to see the site? I found the link, but I don't have the credentials. I think the credentials are in the session area, aren't they, Christina?
Yeah, they should be in the session area. It's NSCC_guest as the username and guest as the password.
And Harold Hale asked, does the OLR address minimum computing requirements for online learning?
It doesn't necessarily go into as much of the computer requirements as more the internet connection speed. We're a pretty rural area, so we actually do have some people living out in the country who are still on, dial-up level speeds, so it's more trying to make sure that they've got the bandwidth to be able to watch a video or anything like that. The only time I mention minimum computing requirements is if they're taking classes that they need to be able to have Word or any other specific program on there, then that's going to depend on which classes they're taking.
And we just have time for a couple more questions. Dave asked, what plans for simulations do you have in mind, since you mentioned simulations that you were thinking about adding?
I know one of the earlier presentations used Adobe Captivate. I've got Captivate, but honestly I prefer Articulate Storyline, which can do just about some of the same things. I had a plan for trying to make the panel on the left side with the course tools on there, similar to how that would actually be in a Sakai site, and they could click on that and click on different buttons to actually have more information pop up on how to do things.
And Margaret Groombridge asked, is this tailored for accessibility?
We tried to include captions and transcript when possible. The accessibility is not necessarily I hate to say it, but it's not our biggest concern. We have a very small number of students who have a lot of accessibility issues, and most of it, case of just we make sure the videos have closed captions or transcripts available, and that tends to take care of most of it. Again, we've got a pretty small population base here, unlike some of the larger schools.
And I think we're going to can only answer a couple more questions. Rich Lenham asked, what application did you use to create your competency site? Did you say Storyline?
Storyline. And that's just because it's pretty intuitive to use. I mean, if you can do a PowerPoint presentation, you can use Storyline.
Oh, and Dave asked, do you have students use a speed tester as part of the OLR to check their internet speed?
We do have a link to speed test in there, so they can go in and see what their internet speed is.
Okay, and I think that's pretty much the last of the questions and the end of our time. So thank you very much, Christina. It looks like there was lots of interest and a lot of people are going to check out your site. And thank you for sharing your research.
Thank you guys all for listening to me.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.